ジェレミーと申します。I am the author of the Japanese grammar textbook, Learn Japanese from Some Guy. In this series of videos, I hope to take you through chapter by chapter of my textbook, where we will look at beginner and intermediate level Japanese grammar. So, whether you are a complete beginner or you have a little experience with the language, I'm sure there will be something in here for everyone. So, without further ado, 始まりましょうか。よろしくお願いします。
Alright everyone, here we are, chapter 1, and like I said, today we're going to be learning the kana of the Japanese language. So, most students of Japanese are often frightened by the idea of having to learn to read Hiragana and Katakana, but I can promise you that learning to read and also write Japanese is very simple. And of course, I think it's very fun. So, we'll start with a short introduction of the kana. So first, we have katakana. So as you may or may not know, katakana is often used to write loan words. So loan words are basically words that have been adopted into the Japanese language from other languages. So here we have some common examples. So we have kohi, which is coffee, toire for toilet, or computer for computer. So you'll notice that these words sound very similar to the original word kohi, coffee, toire, toilet. And so this is kind of great for us because oftentimes we'll see a katakana word and we'll know what it means in English because it sounds very similar. Okay, and here we have our katakana chart. So in the column over here, we have our consonants, and in the top row, we have our vowels. So we have a, I, u, e, o. And when we combine a consonant with a vowel, we can get a new sound. So let's practice. So we have ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. Sa, shi, su, se, so. Ta, chi, su, te, to. Na, ni, nu, ne, no. Ha, hi, hu, he, ho. Ma, mi, mu, me, mo. Ya, yu, yo. La, li, lu, le, lo. Wa, wo. And finally we have m. So as you notice, there's no vowel here. It's just the N sound, much like you would read it in English. M. And really quickly, just a pronunciation point. Oftentimes, beginners of the language have trouble with this row right here. Many times, people, especially English speakers, want to read it as ra, ri, ru, re, ro, but that's not quite right. What you really want to do is kind of make an R and a D sound. So usually what I recommend students to do is put your tongue at the top of your mouth, like you're going to make a D sound, like da, da. But instead of saying da, you're going to make an R sound. So we have la, li, lu, le, lo. Da, li, lu, le, lo. And also, I also want to point out that this is not a mistake, writing hu with an F. The pronunciation is more like an F than an H. It's a very quiet sound, but it's more of like a hu than a hu. So oftentimes you'll see this character written in Romaji as FU. All right, and moving on. So here we have some other charts with our katakana characters. So these are basically the exact same characters as above with slight modifications. So we can see that if we add these two little dots to the ka character, it gets a hard G sound. So ka becomes ga, ki becomes gi, ku becomes gu, ke becomes ge, ko becomes go. And we can see here in this row, the sa becomes za, shi becomes ji, and so on. So let's practice really quickly. So the first row we have ga, gi, gu, ge, go. Za, ji, zu, ze, zo. Da, ji, zu, de, do. Ba, bi, bu, be, bo. Pa, pi, hu, he, ho. So if you can remember the characters up here, learning these characters shouldn't be any problem at all. So if we have the character for ha, we can add the two little dots here and it becomes ba. If we know the character for te and we can add the two characters, it becomes de. The only one that's a little different is the papi pupe po. So notice that these are the only characters that have a little circle here. Okay, so if you want to say pa, you put a circle. If you want to say ba, make the two little dots. And here we have characters that are basically combinations of two characters. So here we have the character for ki and the character for ya. Put them together and we get kya. The character for ki, the character for yu, put them together and we get kyu. Here we have the character for ki and the character for yo, and we get kyo. So please notice that the ya, yu, and yo characters are written to be smaller than normal. This is to indicate that it's not ki ya, but it's kya. Not ki yu, but kyu. Not ki yo, but kyo. So we can practice really quickly. We have kya, kyu, kyo. Lia, du, ryo. Sha, shu, sho. Gya, gyu, gyo. Cha, chu, cho. Ja, ju, jo. Nya, nyu, nyo. Bya, byu, byo. Hya, hyu, hyo. Pya, pyu, pyo. Mya, myu, myo. And this may seem like a lot, but really, again, if you just learn the characters up here, memorizing or learning to read these characters shouldn't be a problem at all, because if you know that this character says chi and this character says yo, you put them together and you get cho. If you know this character says gi and this character says ya, you get ya. So all of this might seem like way too much, but really just practice this chart up here, learn these characters, and then learning to read their modified characters shouldn't be any problem at all. All right, next we're going to move on to our hiragana. So hiragana, unlike katakana, is used to write native Japanese words. So what this means is, for example, if we have the word for to eat, which is taberu, we use hiragana. So here we have a hiragana for be, hiragana for ru. And as you'll notice here, we have the kanji character. So if for some reason you didn't know how to write this character, you could just use hiragana. So you could write it as taberu, taberu. So this word right here is pronounced the exact same as this word right here, taberu, taberu. So hiragana is used to write Japanese words. So if you don't know how to write out a kanji character, you could just use hiragana and there's no problem. But don't rely on this. It's not a really good strategy. You should also learn to write kanji because it makes, oddly enough, it makes reading Japanese much easier. And I remember when I was first learning Japanese, I didn't like kanji at all. I thought it made learning the language really hard, but as you study more and get more used to the language, you'll see that, wow, kanji makes it so much easier. So don't be afraid of kanji. It makes learning it so much easier, and it's actually really, really interesting, really kind of fun. So try to learn kanji, but since we're just starting out, writing something in hiragana is no problem. All right, so here we have our hiragana chart. And you'll see that it's almost the exact same as our katakana chart from above. We have our vowels in the first row, our consonants in the column here, and the sounds they make, kaki kuke ko, sashi suse so, and so on. So the only difference is the way the characters are written. So the pronunciation is the exact same, but the characters look a little different. Some of them are quite similar. Like, for example, here we have ka in hiragana and ka in katakana. Almost look the exact same. They're very similar. But this isn't the case for all the characters. So, for example, if we have nu, this character here looks quite a bit different from the hiragana nu. So you'll just have to learn both charts. Some of the characters look similar. So memorizing some of them shouldn't be too hard, but most of them kind of look different. And you'll just have to get used to reading and writing both of them. And also, just like katakana, hiragana also has the modified characters, and it works the exact same way. Add the two little dots, and ka becomes ga, ki becomes gi, ku becomes gu, and so on. Ha becomes pa with the little circle, ki becomes pi with the circle. And just like our katakana characters, we have the combined characters, kya, kyu, kyo, nya, nyu, nyo, mya, myu, myo. So if you can pronounce the katakana characters you can also pronounce the hiragana characters. They're the exact same. All right, and moving on. So really quickly, I have a pronunciation point. Okay, so as we go through this book, we'll see a small tsu character that looks like this. Okay, so when you see this small tsu, we don't actually read the sound like we would the regular size character. Okay, so what this represents, this tsu and this small tsu, is a pause in the word. Okay, so when we write out a word in Romaji, we use a double consonant to represent this pause. So, for example, if we have the word bikkuri, we'll write it bikkuri. So this double K represents this little pause right here. So we have bikkuri or kissu. So this double S represents this little pause right here. Natto, nippon. So whenever you see the double consonants, you'll know you have to pause. But don't get too used to reading Romaji. You should really try to focus on learning to read Hiragana and Katakana. But when you see the small tsu character, just know it represents a pause. So we have bikkuri, kissu, natto, nippon. And it may not seem like a big deal, but getting the pause in is very important because you might inadvertently say a different word, or someone might not be able to understand what you're trying to say. If you mean to say nippon and you say nippon, people might have a hard time catching what you're trying to say. So really focus on getting that pause. Nippon, kissu, bikkuri, natto. It might seem a little strange at first, but it's a very important part of the language. So, practice. Next, we have the pronunciation of the wo character. So when we write wo in Romaji, we use a W-O, okay? But we don't want to pronounce it like we're saying, whoa. It sounds more like O with a slight inkling of a W sound at the beginning. So for example, we could say, watashi wa sushi wo tabetai desu. Watashi wa sushi wo tabetai desu. I want to eat sushi. So remember, we don't say wo, we say wo. Next, we have the pronunciation of the ha or the wa character. And actually, this one is a little tricky because it can be pronounced two different ways. Okay, so when ha is being used as a particle in a sentence and not part of a word, it's pronounced as wa, like in water. So for example, we have a sentence, kore wa nihongo desu. Kore wa nihongo desu. So even though if we look up at our hiragana chart, we'll see that we have wa, and it's written with an HA. So when it's a part of a word, we read it as ha. But when it's being used as a particle, we read it as wa. Kore wa nihongo desu. So to make it a little more clear, I have another example here. We have kore wa hashi desu. Kore wa hashi desu. So here we have a word, hashi, or chopsticks, where we have the ha character. And please notice that we read it as ha, because here it's being used as a part of a word, but here we have the same character, but we read it as wa, because it's being used as a particle. Kore wa hashi desu. And it may seem strange, but even when it's pronounced wa, we still write it in Romaji as ha with an H. Some people I have seen use a W, but I don't think that's really correct. It should be written with an H, even though it's being pronounced as wa. So just know, when being used as a particle, it's pronounced wa. When it's being used as part of a word, it's pronounced ha. All right, and moving on to some good stuff, the kanji. So we're not going to talk too much about kanji, and I don't want to bore you with a bunch of details, but odds are, if you're interested in Japanese and you're watching this video, you probably have some understanding or at least some idea of what kanji is. But really quickly, by the time students of Japan graduate from high school, they should know over 2,000 kanji characters. So if you want to read like a newspaper or open a bank account or something, you have to know at least 2,000 to kind of function in society as like a upstanding member. But I think for regular everyday life, just knowing a couple hundred is more than enough to kind of get through the day. Go to the store, read a subway map or something like that. So 2,000 seems like a lot, but really it's not so much considering how many kanji characters there are. And just knowing a couple hundred will give you more than enough knowledge to to get by in day-to-day life. But again, like I said before, kanji is really cool and it really helps learning Japanese. So don't be afraid of kanji. Try to learn as much as you can. It will really, really help learn new words, help you understand how to conjugate verbs. Very, very important. So kanji is cool. Don't be afraid. All right, and next we're going to look at the grammar structure of the Japanese language. So we're not going to go into too much detail here. I just want to kind of introduce the basic idea. So in English, when we make a sentence, we often use a subject, verb, object structure. So we would say, for example, I study Japanese. So in Japanese, they use a subject, object, verb structure. So if we had the same sentence, I study Japanese, but we wanted to say it using a Japanese sentence structure, we would say, I Japanese study. So basically the verb comes at the end of the sentence when we speak Japanese. So at first, kind of getting used to this idea is a little strange because odds are you've been speaking English your whole life and you've been putting the verb, before the object. But in Japanese, the verb comes at the end. But really this kind of makes speaking the language a lot easier because it's a lot more flexible, and we'll see that as we study. But just know the verb comes at the end of the sentence. All right, and finally, we're just going to wrap up this video with some recommendations. Okay, so every sentence will be written in this textbook in Hiragana and Katakana. So I strongly encourage you to study the above charts and learn how to read the characters. I will also include the romaji. So if you're not sure how to read a hiragana or kanji character or a katakana character, you'll still be able to read the sentence, but don't rely on romaji. It's not a good idea. So I recommend, just making some index cards and carrying them around in your pocket. So when I was first learning to read Japanese, I just made some index cards with the katakana characters and some index cards with the hiragana characters, and I just carried them around in my pocket. And whenever I had a couple minutes, I would just, drill myself. And I found that within just a couple days, I could recognize, most, if not all of the characters. So learning to read it is very easy. And also writing them down is a very good practice as well because it kind of reinforces what you study. So make some flashcards. Let me know how it worked for you. I promise, within a week, you'll be able to read all the characters. And also, we're not going to learn kanji explicitly, but I encourage everyone as you go through this book to kind of try to write some kanji characters. It's really a vital part of learning Japanese. And there's a really cool website right here, kakijun.jp. If you see a kanji character and you're not sure how to write it, you can get the stroke order and how to write it the correct way at this website. So just go here, input the character, and hit the enter button, and it'll take you to the page and show you how to write it. So if you're not sure how to write a character, go here, and it'll tell you. All right. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video or today's chapter. Next time, we're going to look at chapter 2, and we're going to learn how to say our first sentence. So now that all that boring stuff is out of the way, we can kind of start getting into the cool stuff and start speaking some Japanese. So be sure to come back next time for that, and we'll see you then.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's chapter. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe if you wish to get updated on when future videos are released. Also, if you wish to support this series, or you're just so motivated you can't wait for that next video to come out, my book is available for purchase on Amazon, the link for which will be in the description box below. As always, your comments and reviews are greatly appreciated, so be sure to let me know what you think. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Mata ne!